Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. Today, this will be the build video for the 3-inch Hyperbaby. And now, if you want to know a little bit more, sort of an introduction and a little bit more info on the parts, there'll be a link down below to a video I already done on that. So let's get right into it here. Alright, so first up, let's just get our motors mounted, and since these are all clockwise threaded motors, it does not matter where we put them on, front or back, left or right, does not matter, so we can just put these on. The motors themselves come with 4 little screws. I believe these are M2 by 5 maybe. I'm just going to need a little hex wrench for these and get some Loctite on these. I will not be soft mounting these motors, mainly because it's just a little bit harder to get something pre-made that saw mounts for this. I could 3D print something, I'm sure, or I could just put you know, some tape under it, but I'm just going to soft mount the flight controller with the little bobbin things. So basically these screws, just put some blue Loctite on them and they just go right up through, just there, real simple, and just make sure the screw isn't touching, but if you're using these same parts, you can see it's not touching the coils in there, which we have no issues. So let's put all 4 screws in. Okay, that's all them in. I did not tighten them down, and since these are specifically these holes, they're not slots, they're specifically made for these motors this size. You know, it doesn't move, so you don't have to worry about getting exactly in the center because it'll already be there for the middle, and then you can just use the other end to give it a little bit of tension down. Definitely don't over tighten these, you don't need to go crazy, but just make sure you snug it up. There we go. So I'll go ahead and finish the other 3 in the same fashion. Alright, so the motors are all screwed in there, so we're good to go. And once again, these wires are plenty long enough to reach to our 4-in-1 ESC in the middle. And now I have been at this for about an hour, trying to figure out how to make this stack work the best, because with this flight controller here, obviously I want to soft mount this. And I was going to use these little, you know, rubber soft mount standoffs things here, but I ran into some issues with it included hardware and just the overall stack height. But I think I eventually came up with a solution that I'm going to go with because I don't think I can get anything better. I've mocked it up so many different ways. So it's basically going to be an M3 by 6 bolt. These are really common, or you could use a nylon standoff, anything like that. And basically it just goes up through the holes here. These smaller inner ones are 20 by 20 flight controller, but we don't need that. We need the outer ones for 30 by 30 or 30.5 by 30. But these are really shallow, so if you just screw this in, it won't hit the bottom there. So I actually had to put 2 little washers underneath it there, and I just got these washers just out of some motors I think they came with, but any kind of little tiny spacer to get that on there. And then the flight controller will be able to sit on top of that, and that'll give us enough room for a battery strap underneath. Since there are not slots for it there, it has to run underneath the board. Then we can take another little standoff right here. Once again, just an M3 by 6 with a little spacer portion on the bottom, and that will tighten down the edges of the flight controller. And then we'll be able to mount the Rush VTX. We should do it upside down since it's on the top. That way we can see the display there for our channels through the top plate. And since these buttons are on the side, we can also read them. And that will give us just enough clearance between the flight controller and the PDB to be good there. And then just these blue standoffs will go on right here. Basically those just screw down, and then I'll tighten up the whole stack. And the reason you have to use these is because of this camera mount, if you're going to use it. Well, it goes on the other end, but these holes here, they slide down over the standoffs. They go, it's a press fit, it's real tight, they slide down over. So basically it's going to sit like this on top of the board. It'll be this way over here, but it's basically going to look like that. And then this top plate will tighten that down, and we can put our receiver on top of here. And I really didn't like that just because there's so much wasted space there, but I couldn't come up with any other way to do it. And it's not really that big of a deal having a high top part like this, because it's not like we're strapping our battery up there, so we're not raising the CG because there's hardly any weight. So that's what I'm going to go with. So I'll take this back apart, and then we'll start wiring the motors up to the ESC here. Alright, all the rubber standoffs here are installed with the method that I just described here. You can see they're squishy and they're going to provide soft mounting there. So I can get these motor wires out of the way. Basically, the flight controller is just going to go on. If we look at the frame, you can see the flight controller is actually going to be offset, but that shouldn't affect the flight performance at all. That just allows room for the camera to sit up front without the props hitting, because if you put the camera on the back here, the props are going to hit it. But up front, it has enough room to clear with the Stretch X design. So on the KISS board, there's a little arrow up there that says front, so we're basically just going to plop that down. Just fits real nice, shouldn't have any issues there. And then I'm going to actually just take the standoffs and just real quick tighten them, which will just hold down the board for us while we solder in the motor wires to the ESC on the 4-in-1 ESC here. And now this is really nice since it's all the flight control and the ESC are connected internally. We don't have to worry about any wires from the ESC to the flight controller, like the signal, the ground, the power, the telemetry. That's all done internally. So really, this is going to be super simple. I'm just going to take, say, our 3 wires here. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so we have our 3 wires coming out from the motor here, and they are just all straight and uncrossed. We can just solder the little jumpers on the board to change motor direction, so I'm going to be doing them all straight. Basically, I'm just going to try and get a good amount of wire here down straight along the arm. And I'm going to, since we have so much room underneath the board here, and these have these little rounded cutouts, if it can focus, little rounded cutouts that will fit the wires, I'm actually going to, instead of doing something like this on top of them or in them, they could break off easy. I'm going to run them like this up under, sort of, and put them in the channels themselves to tighten off, because that will keep it a lot cleaner and a lot more durable, I think. So just going to basically get a good length for these. Kind of hard to see. I don't want them to be too slack, but I don't want them to be too short, obviously. I'll just do one at a time since they're different lengths. Okay, this is the outside one. Got our soldering iron, and I have the heat turned up pretty high. I think I have it at 380 degrees Celsius here. Maybe a little high because these are smaller wires and smaller pads, and say something on a 5-inch, but it should work all right here. You just want to heat up the wire and make sure everything flows well together, and it should be shiny if you do it right there. There we go. And now I'll tin the pads just a little bit. The motor wires out of the way. Okay, there's that. Now let's see if I can get the wires in right with a good joint. There we go. That all looks pretty good there. Just make sure nothing is touching each other. No shorts, just visually. And then we can sort of tuck the wires back onto the arm here. Get them up there. Then I'll probably put a zip tie around them when I'm done, but I think that looks pretty decent. Doesn't look the greatest, maybe. I would like to have the board lower and sort of put them on a horizontal, but I think this will keep them, because if you put them straight out, like a branch could come through here and just nick them off real easy. So I think that's probably the best way of doing it with the way I have set up. So I'll go and finish the other 3. Alright, and you probably can leave these wires just like as is, but for a little peace of mind, I like to put something around them like electrical tape, or in this case, I'm just going to use some small black zip ties. And And that's what that looks like. Pretty good if I do say so myself. So next we can just remove these standoffs here that we put on to hold the flight controller ESC combo while we soldered all that up. And this should be loose, but the wires should be holding on depending on the amount of slack you left in. You can vary there. So next we're going to be looking into adding our video transmitter here. Once again, after a lot of messing around before we put this video transmitter on, since there's still stuff we need to solder on here, it'd be a good idea to get that lengthened out and soldered in, just like the main battery lead here, which I already did. And now the pads are very small on this. You can see that's pretty close. I had to use 16 gauge wire here. I wanted to use some 14 just because that's what's on this battery I have, but it would not fit. The wires would touch. So 16 is the gauge you're going to have to use for this. And I really struggled with the placement of this because I wasn't sure where I wanted it and how I wanted it. I couldn't find any pictures online how other people built it, so I ended up just doing this with a just pulling it down like that, trying to be as kind to the boards. Because this is such thin gauge wire, it can bend that sharply there, and then zip tying the XT60 through the SMA hole since I won't be using it, and then another slot in the bottom of the frame right here, so that gives it some stress relief on the board. And then the battery will fit under here, like out the front, I think. Yeah, so out the right now this side's the front. Fit like that. That's the front, and then this comes around and I have it bent so it goes up into it, and it'll plug in there and it'll stay low enough when it's plugged in that it'll be able to sit there. And I did do a continuity check before I plugged it in. Oops, just get it all the way plugged in. So you can see that everything's working. If I let it sit, the ESC lights will come on. There they are, all 4 blue, so everything's looking good there. But make sure you triple check all your polarities and everything, then nothing is shorted. And do a continuity check with a multimeter for sure on the main leads and a couple other points before you plug in a battery. So really the only other connections we need for this is the rush, these 2 wires here. I'm going to take full voltage in, and I would like to, there's a separate battery pad on the bottom of the board here, but there's really no good way to get to that, especially at this point, so I'm probably just going to end up piggybacking these wires on top of the battery and put leads there. And I was thinking probably have the rush upside down and backwards like that. You can see that in the stack there. Hopefully it's just plenty of room, because this will leave the wires room to run underneath and connect there. And this will put our little whip antenna here with the MMCX connector. It just plugs right in the back. That's super nice and convenient to come up through, and then I can zip tie it to this top plate with maybe a little bit of bend in it. And then the this connector here we can bunch up just a little bit, and that'll be a decent length since I don't feel like shortening it, to just plug straight into the camera up here, which then uses this little thing to mount, and it'll be there. And then the XSR receiver, since I didn't have an XM Plus on hand, I chose to mount it with the antennas coming around the back instead of going straight up through. It keeps them a little shorter. I'll have to get some antenna tubes to protect them, but then it'll leave the wires coming out of this plug. If it's something like this, it'll zip tie to this top plate here. Then this will come up through the side, this antenna, and that'll sit somewhere about there. Just imagine the camera's in it, and then the wires will come straight down to these pads. Okay, I got the camera. I just real quick screwed it in with the supplied screws into this mount just to get that in there nice and tight. Holds the angle well. However, you do have to take the stock back off. You can see this one has these extra mounting holes. They won't fit. They include just a plain back. You have to put that on, but that only takes a few seconds. So let's get the rush power wires sorted, which will be these 2. So they're going to run underneath the board for me here, and then they're going to come out. Let's see which one's positive. Positive is on the end, so they're going to come out right over here. And I'm basically just going to cut a little bit of length off of these just to keep it a little bit cleaner. that soldered on well enough. And this will run underneath the video transmitter here. And we can plug this guy back in right there, and that'll basically stack up, and that keeps it a little bit cleaner there. And then I might actually, if I have enough room, I might actually run these wires underneath and then up to the camera underneath the board here. Let me see if I have enough for that, because that'll make it look a lot cleaner. Okay, looks like we actually will have room, and then that'll tuck up. Actually, that's nice. That's really nice and clean. Makes it a lot better. Hides those wires, so that's great. So I can unplug the camera again, so that's all hooked up. But before I fully put this on, just to keep this out of the way, we are going to have to, for our receiver for this XSR here, these pads, it's going to be, what is it? Let me look at the diagram. The S-Bus 5-volt ground, and then the telemetry. I don't use the telemetry, I've never set any of that up. So just S-Bus, 5-volt, and ground from the top there. And on the XSR, that's top wire, and then bottom 2 here. So we can get rid of green and yellow. Just real quick unplugged or pulled those out. So now if we plug this guy back in, we can size up our wiring. Okay, something about there. Just leave some extra slack on this just in case. There. Unfortunately, these are nasty plastic wires, so we gotta strip these with a knife. Alright, let's get the receiver wires in, and then since this standoff's real close to the pad, I'm actually going to take and move that like I did for when I did the battery leads, because I don't want that to get melted by my iron. I can't get in there if it's there. So let's just tin these real quick. The U-port pad right there, and then the 5-volt pad right next to it, and then the ground right next to that. Go. Then we've got ground. There we go. And I'll probably put some hot glue. I don't know. Yeah, I'll leave the hot glue off, but you might want to reinforce those connections since they're such frail, small wires. So now we actually should be done soldering, so let's turn the iron off. So this will come, if this is the front, this is going to come through like this. Around here, let me put that last standoff on. Make sure all the other ones are tight as well. Close enough, and let's pull this wire through. Go, make sure everything fits. All good, that's coming through. And then we got this up here for our receiver. We probably actually have quite a bit too much wire, but I can shove some of it back under there. Always better to have extra than it is to have too little. So that's good. So I'm actually going to put some little washers on the top, or not washers, little nuts to hold the entire stack down together since we're pretty much done with it. So now for our camera, actually these nuts don't go on here. Duh, these standoffs do. There we go, correctly done with these standoffs. Don't be like me, don't put nuts on there. So for the top plate, that's just going to sit right there, and hopefully you can see why I wish it would. It just looks weird. If it was down here, I think that would look sweet, but when we get this camera up here, I guess it won't look so bad maybe. Okay, I got the receiver, just basically a zip tied to the top plate here, and then that goes there. Camera's all plugged in, and now we're going to have to slide. Everything is all good, and just a quick tip, make sure it's very beneficial to bind your receiver before you get this all tied in. It's really easy and free like this, so you don't want to have to go backwards. So I already have that bound, everything plugs in good. Make sure your VTX antenna is on when you do that. Everything looks good here, and now this just slides. Get this out of the way. This TPU just slides down over these standoffs here, so let's see if this can push there. That one started to go. And make sure you have everything sort of finalized before you do this, because I had this on before just to see what it looked like, and wow, this thing is incredibly tough to get off. It slides on easy, but the TPU grips so well, you're not getting it off. Just trying to shove some of these wires back under so it looks cleaner once this comes down. Just keep going on there. And there we go. All the way suited to the bottom, and the camera is free to move. So this should, these antennas will just come back through. This is going to be tough. I don't have any antenna tubes for this guy. So these are just going to stick up because antenna tubes are supposed to poke down through here. But I don't have any for that. Okay, there we go. That's all put in there. Once again, it does kind of look a little bit funny with it being so high there. But that should be alright. So now I'll just put a zip tie around the back here. Okay, there's that. Looks real good. It's not going anywhere. You can shift back and forth, but it keeps the connection solid and everything's good. So let me see if I can find some heat shrink just to put around these antennas, because it kind of worries me how frail they are, but because I do have antenna tubes coming in a little bit for that. But yeah, let's finish this guy up. There we go, all done basically. So I just put a little bit of heat shrink on there, as well as zip tied the antenna back and put some props on. These are Racecraft 3076 because I think they look amazing. I have not tested them yet, especially not on this build. Obviously I just built it, but I'll also be testing the Racecraft 3030 quad blade and the Lumineer 3040 tri blade. So let's weigh this guy. So place your bets now. How much do you think it will weigh? Let me see. I bet it weighs, I'll go with 140 grams. That's what I'm going to guess. Let's guess that. Dang it, 164.5. So, yeah, that's not that bad. I'm not really that up to date with 3-inch build weights. Obviously, we could have saved some weight with the frame a little bit. It was a tiny bit heavy. Using the 4-in-1 ESC and flight controller probably helped a lot on weight there, combining it all into one instead of having it all separate. Saved all the solder, saved all the separate components and the wires connecting them. Obviously, we saved a lot on the whip antenna here versus an SMA connector with a normal circularly polarized antenna. But we did lose some weight on using a full-size run cam here instead of the run cam micro Swift we could have used to save, I don't know, what is it, like 6 grams? But overall, I think that's pretty decent. Let's put the battery on with it. So here's the Bonka 850 with it, and it weighs 270.8 grams. So I think it is like, what, at least 20 grams lighter than my other 3-inch, but it does have bigger motors, and it should be a lot more powerful. So yeah, that was the end of the build video, and just to prove once again that it does work, you can see everything powers on there. We got our receiver power, and it's all good, as well as we have really easy access to the video transmitter in there. We can see the screen real easy, not through the top plate, but through the side. There's plenty of room, and we have the frequency and power buttons right there to choose from. So that was the end of the Hyperbaby build. I hope you enjoyed it and you found it helpful. There will be links down below to each of the individual parts used in this, as well as a link to my Patreon if you wish to help support the channel and you enjoy these types of videos. So yeah, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.